What started as a routine promotional interview turned into television chaos when George Clooney and Stephen Colbert clashed over international politics, resulting in the A-list actors storming off set in what's being called the most explosive talk show moment of the year. The Late Show's studio audience settled into their seats, expecting another polished evening of celebrity banter and promotional sound bites. George Clooney, dapper as always in his tailored navy suit, took his place across from Stephen Colbert with the easy confidence of a man who'd navigated countless interviews throughout his decades-long career. The initial pleasantries flowed smoothly, jokes about Clooney's latest directorial project, light-hearted ribbing about his marriage to human rights lawyer Amal Clooney, and the typical Hollywood charm that audiences had come to expect. But beneath Colbert's trademark grin, something felt different tonight. His questions carried an edge that seasoned entertainment journalists in the audience began to notice immediately. When Clooney mentioned his upcoming film's themes of international justice, Colbert's demeanor shifted perceptibly. "You know, George, it's interesting how Hollywood celebrities always seem to have such strong opinions about global politics," Colbert said, his voice maintaining its conversational tone while his eyes narrowed slightly. "I mean, what exactly qualifies an actor to lecture world leaders about foreign policy?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Clooney's practiced smile faltered for just a moment before he composed himself. "Well, Stephen, I think when you've spent time in refugee camps, when you've seen the human cost of political decisions firsthand, you develop a perspective that transcends job titles." "Right, but perspective isn't expertise, is it?" Colbert pressed, leaning forward in his chair. "I mean, you've made some pretty bold statements about American foreign policy lately. Some might say you're speaking from a position of privilege, while criticizing the very system that made your lifestyle possible." The studio audience began to sense the tension building. What had started as typical late-night banter was evolving into something more confrontational. Clooney's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his media training kept him composed. "I think that's exactly the kind of thinking that keeps us from making progress," Clooney replied, his tone still measured but with a hint of steel entering his voice. "The idea that only politicians can speak about policy or that success somehow disqualifies you from caring about global issues, that's how we end up with the mess we're in." Colbert's laugh had a sharp edge to it. "The mess we're in? You mean the country that gave you the freedom to become a millionaire making movies? The same country whose military protects the international stability that allows your humanitarian work to even exist? Stephen, with all due respect, that's an incredibly simplistic view of—" "Simplistic?" Colbert interrupted, his voice rising slightly. "What's simplistic is celebrities thinking they can jet around the world, take a few photos with refugees, and suddenly they're qualified to criticize American foreign policy on international stages. You've been pretty vocal about U.S. interventions abroad, haven't you?" The atmosphere in the studio had shifted dramatically. Audience members were exchanging glances, unsure whether this was part of some elaborate bit or if they were witnessing a genuine confrontation. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every micro-expression as the two men faced off. Clooney's composure was beginning to crack. "I've been vocal about human rights violations, yes. I've been vocal about the need for accountability when civilian populations are being—" "Accountability?" Colbert cut him off again, his trademark smirk now looking more like a sneer. "That's rich coming from someone who made millions working with Harvey Weinstein. Where was your famous moral compass then, George? Where was all this passion for accountability when it might have actually cost you something?" The question hit like a physical blow. The studio fell into stunned silence. Even the production crew seemed frozen, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let the carnage continue. Clooney's face flushed, his carefully maintained Hollywood composure finally beginning to crumble. "That's completely out of line," Clooney said, his voice low but audibly shaking with anger. "You want to talk about accountability? How about we discuss your accountability as a host, This isn't journalism, Stephen. This is ambush television. Ambush television? Colbert's voice dripped with mock incredulity. I'm simply asking questions that your typical sycophantic interviewers won't ask. If you can't handle basic scrutiny about your public statements and associations, maybe you should stick to reading scripts instead of trying to influence policy. The tension in the room was now palpable. Security personnel near the stage had moved slightly closer, sensing that the situation was spiraling beyond normal television parameters. Clooney's hands were visibly trembling, whether from rage or shock was unclear. You know what, Stephen? Clooney's voice was barely controlled, now each word measured and deliberate. I came here tonight to talk about a film that addresses real human suffering, real injustice. Instead, I'm sitting across from someone who's decided to turn human rights advocacy into a punchline for his audience's entertainment. Colbert leaned back in his chair with theatrical casualness. Oh, so now I'm the villain because I won't treat you like some kind of secular saint? Because I won't nod along while you virtue signal about issues you experience from the comfort of your Italian villa? That final comment seemed to be the breaking point. Clooney's face went completely white, then flushed deep red as the words hit their mark. The calculated cruelty of the comment, attacking not just his advocacy but his personal life and wealth, had crossed every line of professional courtesy. For a moment, the only sound in the studio was the quiet hum of the cameras and the collective, held breath of 300 audience members witnessing something unprecedented. My Italian villa? Clooney's voice was dangerously quiet now, the kind of controlled fury that preceded explosive confrontations. You really want to go there? Stephen, you want to make this personal? Colbert seemed to sense he'd struck gold, his eyes lighting up with the predatory gleam of someone who'd found their opponent's weakness. I'm just pointing out the contradiction, George. It's hard to take moral lectures seriously when they come from someone living in luxury while criticizing the very systems that created that luxury. You don't know anything about what I've sacrificed or what I've put on the line, Clooney shot back, his composure now completely abandoned. You sit behind this desk every night making jokes while people are dying in conflicts that could be prevented with proper international pressure. But sure, let's talk about my house instead of the children I've seen in refugee camps. The audience was now completely silent, sensing they were witnessing something that would be replayed and analyzed for years to come. Several people in the front rows were recording on their phones despite studio policies, instinctively knowing they were seeing television history. Colbert's response was swift and merciless. Oh, the children card. Classic celebrity activism. 101. When your argument gets challenged, pivot to the children. Tell me, George, how many of those children have you actually helped versus how many photo opportunities they provided? The question was so callous, so deliberately inflammatory, that audible gasps arose from the audience. Even some of Colbert's own production staff looked uncomfortable, shifting nervously behind their cameras. Clooney stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor with a harsh sound that echoed through the suddenly silent studio. You know what? I'm done. This isn't an interview, it's character assassination, masquerading as entertainment. Oh, sit down, George, Colbert said dismissively, waving his hand as if brushing away an annoying insect. You can't handle a few tough questions and suddenly you're the victim? This is exactly the problem with Hollywood elites. You expect everyone to genuflect to your supposed moral authority. Tough questions? Clooney's voice cracked with indignation. You've spent the last 10 minutes attacking my personal life, my marriage, my business relationships, and my humanitarian work. What exactly does any of that have to do with the film I came here to discuss? Colbert's smirk widened. Everything, actually, because your film is just another vanity project disguised as social consciousness. Another way for you to pat yourself on the back while real journalists do the actual work of holding people accountable. The personal nature of the attack seemed to genuinely shock Clooney. His hands were shaking now, whether from anger or disbelief was impossible to tell. Real journalists? You're a comedian, Stephen. You make jokes for a living. The fact that you think you have the moral authority to question anyone's contributions to society is absolutely staggering. At least I'm honest about what I do, Colbert fired back. I don't pretend my entertainment has some higher purpose. I don't lecture world leaders from red carpets or use humanitarian crises as publicity opportunities. That accusation seemed to be the final straw. Clooney's face contorted with rage, his carefully maintained Hollywood veneer completely shattered. Publicity opportunities? I've put my life on the line documenting war crimes. I've used my own money, my own resources, my own platform to shine light on injustices that people like you ignore because they don't make good punchlines. And I'm sure the tax write-offs don't hurt either, Colbert said with casual cruelty. The studio erupted, in shocked murmurs. Even the most ardent Colbert fans in the audience seemed taken aback by the host's relentless personal attacks. Several production assistants were frantically speaking into their headsets, clearly receiving instructions from producers who were trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. Clooney took a step toward Colbert's desk, his fists clenched, at his sides. You want to know what's really pathetic, Stephen? You've built a career on righteous indignation, on calling out hypocrisy and holding powerful people accountable. But when you get someone in this chair who's actually trying to make a difference, you tear them down because it makes you feel better about your own moral cowardice. Moral cowardice? Colbert's voice rose to match Clooney's intensity. I'm not hiding behind charity work to avoid criticism of my political grandstanding. At least when I take political positions, I own them instead of wrapping them in humanitarian packaging. The confrontation had now escalated beyond anything resembling normal television discourse. Both men were on their feet, facing each other. Across the narrow space between guest chair and host desk, their voices echoing through the studio as the audience watched in stunned fascination. You know what your problem is, Stephen? Clooney's voice was hoarse with emotion now. You're so cynical, so convinced that everyone's motives are as shallow as your own, that you can't recognize genuine commitment when it's sitting right in front of you. Colbert's face twisted into an ugly sneer. Genuine commitment? Please. Your entire public persona is calculated brand management. Every charitable appearance, every political statement, every carefully staged photo with refugees. It's all designed to maintain your image as Hollywood's moral conscience. The accusation hung in the air like poison. Clooney's hands were trembling with rage, his usually composed demeanor completely shattered. You have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. None. You sit in your comfortable studio making jokes about real suffering while people who actually care try to make a difference. Make a difference? Colbert laughed harshly. You mean like when you made a difference by staying silent about Harvey Weinstein for years? Or when you made a difference by taking millions from oil companies while lecturing about environmental responsibility? The personal attacks were relentless now, each one designed to inflict maximum damage. The studio audience sat in horrified silence, many filming despite security attempts to stop them. What they were witnessing was beyond entertainment. It was character assassination in real time. Clooney's composure finally exploded completely. You sanctimonious piece of garbage. You think because you hide behind comedy, you can say anything to anyone? You think your little desk gives you the right to destroy people for your audience's amusement? I think the truth gives me that right, Colbert shot back, his voice dripping with venom. And the truth is you're just another Hollywood hypocrite who uses tragedy as a stepping stone to relevance. That was the moment Clooney snapped entirely. His face contorted with pure fury as he stepped closer to Colbert's desk, his voice rising to a roar that echoed through the studio. You want to talk about truth? Here's the truth. You're a bitter, cynical man who tears down people actually trying to help, because it makes you feel better about your own moral bankruptcy. The confrontation had reached its breaking point. Security personnel were now moving toward the stage, but neither man seemed to notice. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of what would become the most infamous talk show meltdown in television history. Colbert stood up behind his desk, matching Clooney's intensity. "At least I don't pretend to be something I'm not. At least I don't use human suffering as a marketing tool for my vanity projects." "Enough!" Clooney's voice cracked with emotion as he slammed his hand on Colbert's desk, the sound reverberating through the silent studio like a gunshot. "I came here tonight to talk about a film that highlights real injustice, real human suffering. Instead, I've been subjected to the most unprofessional, disgusting display of character assassination I've ever experienced." The actor's chest was heaving with emotion, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. The carefully crafted image of George Clooney, Hollywood's dignified statesman, lay in ruins on national television. "You know what, Stephen? You've shown everyone here tonight exactly who you really are," Clooney continued, his voice now deadly quiet but filled with contempt. "You're not a journalist. You're not even a decent comedian. You're just a bully with a platform, tearing down people who actually give a damn about something other than ratings and applause." Colbert's response was swift and cruel. "And you're just another actor who thinks playing pretend on screen makes you qualified to solve the world's problems." The final insult seemed to drain all the fight out of Clooney. His shoulders sagged as the full weight of the public humiliation hit him. The audience watched in stunned silence as one of Hollywood's most respected figures visibly deflated before their eyes. "You know what? I'm done," Clooney said quietly, his voice hollow with defeat. "I'm not going to stand here and let you use me as your punching bag for entertainment." He began removing his microphone with shaking hands, his movements deliberate and final. "This isn't television, Stephen. This is cruelty, and I won't be part of it anymore." Colbert made one last attempt to maintain control of the situation. "Oh, come on, George. Don't be so dramatic. We're just having a conversation." Clooney stopped mid-motion, turning to face Colbert with eyes that burned with quiet fury. "A conversation? You call this character assassination a conversation? You've spent the entire interview attacking my personal life, my marriage, my humanitarian work, and my professional integrity. That's not a conversation. That's a hit job." The studio was now completely silent except for the quiet hum of cameras and the barely audible whispers of shocked audience members. Even the production crew seemed frozen, unsure how to handle the unprecedented situation unfolding before them. "I've been doing interviews for 30 years, Clooney continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "I've dealt with tough questions, aggressive journalists, and hostile media. But what you've done tonight crosses every line of professional decency. You should be ashamed of yourself." With that, Clooney dropped his microphone on the guest chair and walked toward the stage exit. His movements were measured and dignified despite the chaos he was leaving behind. The audience watched in stunned silence as one of Hollywood's biggest stars simply walked away from what had become a public execution. "George, wait," Colbert called out, perhaps finally realizing he had gone too far. But Clooney didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge the hollow attempt at reconciliation. As Clooney disappeared backstage, the studio erupted in confused murmurs and shocked conversations. Colbert stood behind his desk, looking suddenly small and uncertain. The smug confidence that had defined the interview completely evaporated. The cameras continued rolling for several more seconds, capturing Colbert's stunned expression as he realized the magnitude of what had just transpired. The host, who had built his career on righteous indignation and moral authority, now stood exposed as nothing more than a bully who had finally pushed too far. Within hours, clips of the confrontation would flood social media, sparking widespread condemnation of Colbert's conduct and calls for his resignation. The incident would become a defining moment in talk show history, a cautionary tale